Welcome to a deep dive, one that goes way beyond those BuzzFeed quizzes,
Yeah.
the ones you see everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Today, we are exploring the Enneagram.
Okay.
And trust me, this isn't just about, like, finding out if you're a free spirit or a total boss.
Yeah.
It's much more than that.
Yeah, it really is. It's about understanding the why, the core motivations.
Yeah.
And fears that kind of drive our actions, sometimes in ways that we don't even realize.
Like getting a behind-the-scenes look
Exactly.
at your own personality, right? Uncovering those subconscious patterns that shape, how you see the world, how you interact with everyone around you.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that the Enneagram isn't like some new age, trend.
Oh, right.
Its roots actually go way back.
Yeah.
Blending ancient wisdom with modern psychology.
Okay, so we're talking about a system with real depth here. But where do we even begin?
Right.
There are 9 Enneagram types.
Yeah.
Each with its own unique set of traits, right?
Yes, but instead of just listing traits, let's focus on the core motivations and fears.
Okay.
That's where the real aha moments happen.
I love those.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in. Give us the rundown on type 1.
Type 1, the perfectionist. Driven by a deep desire to be good, to live a life of integrity and purpose. They have this inner critic.
Oh, yeah.
That's constantly pushing them toward improvement.
I know a few ones. Always organizing, making sure everything is just so.
Yes.
But it's not just about being neat, is it?
No, it goes much deeper. One's fear being corrupt or defective.
Okay.
So they strive for perfection in everything they do. This makes them incredibly reliable and principled, but it can also lead to being overly critical both of themselves and others.
So understanding that core fear helps us see why ones behave the way they do.
Exactly.
It's not just about being picky, it's about a deeper need to feel morally good.
Exactly. And this understanding can be incredibly helpful, not just for ones themselves, but also for those who interact with them. Knowing that a one's criticism comes from a place of wanting things to be right.
Yeah.
Can help you navigate those interactions with more empathy.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's move on to type 2. What makes the helpers tick?
Type 2, the helper, is all about relationships and putting the needs of others first. They're driven by a need to feel loved and appreciated, and they often express that by caring for and supporting those around them.
The friend who's always there for you no matter what. Always ready with a listening ear and a helping hand.
That's a classic too, but their generosity can sometimes come at a cost.
Oh, okay.
Because their core fear is being unworthy of love. They might neglect their own needs while trying to please everyone else.
So it's not just about being nice. It's about seeking validation through acts of service, which can lead to some unhealthy patterns if they're not careful.
Absolutely. 2s need to learn to set healthy boundaries and recognize that their worth isn't tied to how much they do for others.
It's about finding that balance between giving and receiving.
Yes.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these core motivations and fears really drive the bus. Let's keep going. What about type 3?
Type 3. The achiever
Okay.
is motivated by a need to feel valuable and successful.
Okay.
They're ambitious, adaptable, and often incredibly charming. Think of the person who seems to effortlessly excel in everything they do.
I know a few 3s, always on the go, crushing goals left and right. But there's more to it than just wanting to be successful.
Right. 3s fear being seen as worthless or insignificant.
Okay.
So they strive for achievement and recognition to validate their worth.
Right.
This drive can lead them to great success, but it can also become a trap.
So they might prioritize outward appearances over genuine connection, always striving to project an image of success, even if they're struggling internally.
Exactly. It's important for 3s to recognize that true worth comes from within, not from external accomplishments.
Okay, that's a powerful insight.
Yeah.
Let's move on to type 4.
Okay.
They're the creative, introspective types.
Right. Yes. Type 4, the individualist, is driven by a need to find their unique identity and express themselves authentically.
Right.
They're deeply in touch with their emotions, and they value creativity and self-expression above all else.
The artists, the writers, the musicians.
Yeah.
The ones who wear their hearts on their sleeves.
Yeah.
And aren't afraid to be different.
That's a good way to put it. But 4s have a deep fear of being insignificant or having no real identity.
Okay.
This can lead them to become self-absorbed or overly focused on their perceived flaws.
So they might constantly compare themselves to others, feeling like they're never quite enough.
Yes, and they might withdraw from the world, seeking solace in their inner world of emotions and creativity.
It sounds like 4s need to embrace their unique qualities and realize that their sensitivity is a strength, not a weakness.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between expressing their individuality and connecting with others in a meaningful way.
This is fascinating stuff. Okay, let's keep going. What about type 5?
Type 5, the investigator, is driven by a need to be competent and knowledgeable. They're analytical thinkers who prioritize understanding and independence.
The researchers, the scientists, the deep thinkers who are always seeking knowledge and understanding.
Precisely. But 5s have a core fear of being helpless or incapable.
Okay.
So they constantly seek knowledge as a way to feel secure and in control.
So they might retreat into their own world of ideas and information.
Right.
Feeling overwhelmed by the demands of the external world.
Yes. And this can lead to isolation and difficulty connecting with others on an emotional level. It's important for 5s to remember that vulnerability and connection are not weaknesses, but essential parts of the human experience.
Okay, let's move on to type 6. What drives the loyalist?
Type 6, the loyalist, is driven by a need for security and support. They're incredibly loyal and responsible, always prepared for the worst-case scenario.
The ones who are always thinking things through, questioning everything, and making sure they have a plan for every possibility.
Exactly. But 6s have a deep fear of being abandoned or left to fend for themselves.
Right.
So they seek security in authority figures, systems, or beliefs.
So they might struggle with indecision, constantly seeking reassurance from others to calm their anxieties.
Yes. And it's important for 6s to learn to trust their own inner guidance and build that sense of inner security that doesn't rely solely on external sources.
Okay, this is starting to paint a much clearer picture of how each type operates.
Yeah.
Let's talk about type 7. They're all about fun and adventure, right?
Yes. Type 7, the enthusiast,
Okay.
is driven by a need to be happy and avoid pain. They're spontaneous, optimistic, and always seeking new experiences.
The life of the party, the one who's always planning the next adventure, always looking for the next exciting thing.
That's a 7.
Yeah.
But beneath that exuberance lies a fear of being trapped or deprived.
Right.
They might avoid difficult emotions and constantly seek distractions to keep themselves from feeling bored or limited.
So they might jump from one thing to the next, never fully committing or facing those deeper feelings.
Exactly. It's important for 7s to cultivate mindfulness and learn to appreciate the present moment, embracing both the joys and the challenges that life throws their way.
Okay, let's talk about type 8. What drives the challenger?
Type 8, the challenger, driven by a need to protect themselves and those they care about.
Yeah.
They're strong, assertive, and have a strong sense of justice.
The ones who aren't afraid to speak their mind, stand up for what they believe in, and take charge of a situation.
Yes. 8s have a commanding presence and a natural ability to lead, but their core fear is being controlled or harmed.
Okay.
So they might come across as domineering or confrontational as they try to maintain control.
So they might push people away or struggle with vulnerability because showing weakness feels too risky.
Exactly. 8s need to learn to balance their strength with compassion and allow themselves to be vulnerable with those they trust.
This is giving me a whole new perspective on how 8s operate. All right, last but not least, let's talk about type 9. What makes the peacemaker tick?
Type 9, the peacemaker, is driven by a need to create harmony and avoid conflict.
Right.
They're easygoing, agreeable, and incredibly supportive.
The mediators, the ones who can see all sides of a situation and bring people together.
That's a 9. But their deep fear of disconnection and loss can lead them to suppress their own needs and go along with others, even when it goes against their own desires.
So they might struggle to assert themselves or express their true feelings, which could lead to resentment building up over time.
Exactly. It's important for 9s to recognize their own worth and learn to communicate their needs effectively, understanding that true peace comes from authenticity and genuine connection.
This has been incredible. We've covered all 9 types, and I'm already starting to see those aha moments you were talking about.
And this is just the beginning.
Oh.
We've laid the foundation, and now we can start exploring the deeper layers of the Enneagram.
Yes, there's so much more to discover. But before we dive into those deeper layers, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far.
Each type has its own unique set of strengths and challenges, driven by those core motivations and fears. But remember, no type is inherently better or worse than another.
Right.
It's all about understanding and using this knowledge for personal growth.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've met the players, The perfectionist, the helper, the achiever, and so on. But you mentioned there's even more to the Enneagram than just knowing the 9 types. It's like those personality types are just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Right. Now we're going to go deeper and look at what are called centers of intelligence. It's a way of understanding how different types process the world, their go-to reactions, and how they deal with those core emotions we've been talking about.
I'm intrigued. Break it down for us. What are these centers?
We have 3 centers.
Okay.
The gut center, the heart center, and the head center.
Okay.
Each one represents a different way of approaching the world and making decisions.
So it's not just about what you do, it's about how you process everything that's going on around you.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting because each center has a cluster of 3 Enneagram types associated with it.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack. Let's start with the gut center. What types fall under this category?
The gut center, also known as the instinctive center, includes types 8, 9, and 1.
So the challenger, the peacemaker, and the perfectionist. On the surface, they seem so different. What do they have in common?
Well, they're all driven by a deep need for autonomy and control, reacting instinctively to their environments, especially when they sense a threat to their sense of security or justice.
So it's like they have a superpowered gut instinct that guides their actions.
In a way, yes. Think of it like this. The 8 might assert their power to maintain control. The 9 might withdraw to preserve peace and avoid conflict.
Okay.
And the 1 strives to maintain order and predictability through their principles.
That's fascinating. It's like they're all coming from a place of gut feeling, but expressing it in very different ways.
Precisely. It's not just about the action itself, but the underlying motivation. Driven by the gut center's focus on creating a sense of safety and control in their world.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the heart center?
The heart center, also known as the feeling center, includes types 2, 3, and 4. They prioritize relationships and emotional connections, often making decisions based on their feelings and the needs of others.
So these are the types that are really tuned into their own emotions, and those are the people around them. It's like they lead with their hearts, right?
Yes, but remember, each type within the heart center expresses this in their own way.
Right.
The 2 focuses on helping and caring for others, to feel loved and appreciated. The 3 seeks validation and admiration through achievements and success. And the 4 strives to connect with others through their unique identity and emotional depth.
It's like they're all trying to find their place in the world through relationships and emotional connection.
Yes.
But they each have a different approach.
Exactly. They're all sensitive to rejection and crave that sense of belonging and acceptance.
So understanding the heart center can help us understand why these types are so attuned to the emotional dynamics in relationships. It's like their heart is their compass.
That's a great way to put it.
All right, what about the last center, the head center?
The head center, or the thinking center, includes types 5, 6, and 7. These types rely heavily on their intellect and seek security through knowledge and understanding.
So these are the thinkers, the analyzers, the ones who like to gather information and process it carefully before taking action. It's almost like they lead with their heads instead of their hearts or guts. Right?
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
The 5 withdraws into their world of knowledge to feel competent and self-sufficient. The 6 seeks information and anticipates potential threats to feel safe and secure. And the 7 uses their intellect to plan exciting experiences and avoid negative emotions.
It's like they're all trying to make sense of the world and create a sense of security through their own mental frameworks.
Exactly. They each have a different approach, but they all share that core need for understanding and control through knowledge.
This is really fascinating. It's like each center represents a different operating system.
Yeah.
Influencing how we perceive the world, react to situations, and make decisions. It makes so much sense now why people of the same type can still have very different ways of approaching things.
Absolutely. And keep in mind that everyone uses all 3 centers to some extent, but one center tends to be dominant for each type, shaping their personality and how they navigate the world.
Okay, that's starting to make a lot of sense. But I'm guessing there are even more layers to this, right?
You're catching on quickly. We just explored the centers, but we've got to talk about those wings you mentioned earlier. Remember those?
Yes. It's like how some people of the same type can have subtle differences in their personalities. I have 2 friends who are both type 7s, but one is super outgoing and impulsive, while the other is more thoughtful and cautious.
That's a great example of how wings play out in real life. Basically, each Enneagram type can be influenced by the traits of one of its neighboring types, adding complexity and nuance to their personality.
So if I'm a type 7, I can either have a 6-wing or an 8-wing, right?
Exactly. Think of it as borrowing characteristics from those neighbors.
Okay, I'm starting to see how wings can add a whole new dimension to each type. But how does having a specific wing actually affect someone's behavior? Can you give me an example?
Let's stick with your 7 friends. A 7 with a 6-wing, also known as a 7W6, might be more cautious and thoughtful in their pursuit of pleasure. They'll still crave excitement and new experiences, but they'll also be more aware of potential risks and consequences.
That makes sense. There's still a 7 at heart, but with a touch of 6 groundedness. So what about a 7 with an 8-wing?
A 7 with an 8-wing, or 7W8, is likely to be more assertive and driven. They'll be even more adventurous and less afraid to take risks, pushing boundaries and pursuing their desires with more intensity.
Wow, so even within the same core type, there can be a lot of variation depending on the wing. It's like those wings add extra flavor to the personality, right?
That's a great way to put it. And it's important to note that wings aren't always about one being dominant. Sometimes both wings can be equally influential, creating a more balanced personality. It really depends on the individual and their own personal development journey.
This is making the Enneagram even more fascinating. It's like each person is a unique blend of their core type, their center, and their wing. It explains why even people who share the same type can be so different.
Precisely. And there's even more to explore. We've only just scratched the surface.
My mind is already buzzing with all this new information, but bring on the next layer. I'm ready to dive even deeper.
Great, because we've got to talk about levels of development within each type. It's not just about what type you are, it's about where you are on that spectrum from healthy to unhealthy.
Hold on, what does that even mean? Are you saying there are like good and bad versions of each type?
Not exactly. It's more nuanced than that. It's about how well someone is managing their core fears and motivations. Think of it like this. Each type has its own set of strengths and challenges, but how those play out depends on the individual's level of self-awareness and personal growth.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going. So for example, a healthy type 8 is going to express their assertive nature in a more positive way than an unhealthy type 8.
Exactly. A healthy 8 is still strong and assertive, but they use that strength to empower others, protect the vulnerable, and fight for justice. They're confident, decisive, and inspiring leaders.
But an unhealthy 8 might be more prone to aggression, domination, and controlling behavior.
Yes. Their fear of vulnerability and control can take over, leading to conflict, power struggles, and difficulty forming trusting relationships.
So the Enneagram is about more than just identifying your type. It's about understanding where you are on that spectrum of healthy to unhealthy and recognizing that there's always room for growth.
Yes, and this concept of levels of development applies to all 9 types.
Right.
The Enneagram provides a framework for understanding our patterns, both positive and negative, and for making conscious choices that lead to greater self-awareness and growth.
This is starting to click. So how do we know if we're at a healthy or unhealthy level within our type?
It's a process of self-reflection and observation. The Enneagram gives us a language to understand our motivations, our fears, and how those drive our behavior. By paying attention to our patterns, our reactions to stress, and our habitual ways of interacting with the world, we can start to get a clearer picture of where we are on that spectrum.
So it's not about judging ourselves or putting ourselves in a box. It's about using the Enneagram as a tool for self-discovery and growth.
Exactly. It's about understanding our potential, recognizing our blind spots, and making conscious choices that lead us toward a more authentic and fulfilling life.
This is all so insightful. I feel like we've peeled back so many layers already, but I know there's still more to come.
You're right. We still got to delve into the concepts of integration and disintegration,
Oh, right.
which explore how each type behaves under stress and when they're thriving.
Okay.
But we'll save that for the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back. So we've journeyed through the 9 Enneagram types, right?
We have.
Explored those centers of intelligence.
Yes.
We even uncovered the influence of those fascinating wings. But you mentioned something about integration and disintegration. How each type behaves under stress. And when they're thriving, it sounds almost like each type has a secret superpower and hidden shadow side, you know?
That's a great way to think about it. Integration and disintegration are about how we move along the spectrum of health within our type.
Okay, so walk me through this. What exactly happens when a type is integrating?
Integration is like leveling up. in a video game.
Yeah.
When we're growing and evolving, we start to embody the positive qualities of another type, almost like we're borrowing their best traits to enhance our own.
So it's not about changing our type altogether. It's about becoming a more well-rounded version of ourselves.
Exactly. We still retain our core motivations and fears, but we're accessing a healthier and more balanced way of being.
I like the sound of that. Can you give me an example of how this plays out for a specific type?
Let's take type 6, the loyalist. When 6s are integrated, they move towards 9, the peacemaker.
So those worriers start to chill out a bit.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, remember that 6s crave security and support. They're constantly scanning for threats and questioning everything. But when they integrate towards 9, they tap into that 9-like ability to find peace and trust in the present moment.
So instead of anxiously anticipating what could go wrong, they start to relax and go with the flow.
Precisely. They learn to quiet that inner critic, find a sense of inner calm, and connect with others in a more open and trusting way.
That sounds like a pretty awesome transformation.
It is.
But what about the flip side, disintegration? What happens when a type goes in that direction?
Disintegration is like hitting a stress overload button.
Okay.
We fall back into unhealthy patterns and start to exhibit the negative traits of another type.
Oh, no.
It's like our shadow side takes over.
Okay, this sounds a little less fun.
It can be.
Can you give me an example?
Let's stick with our type 6. When a 6 disintegrates, they move towards 3, the achiever.
The loyalist turns into an overachiever. That seems like a strange combination.
It might seem counterintuitive, but think about it this way. When 6s feel insecure or unsupported, they might try to overcompensate by striving for external validation and success.
So instead of seeking security through loyalty and commitment, they start chasing achievements to prove their worth.
Exactly. They might become workaholics, obsessed with appearances, or overly competitive, all in an attempt to quell that inner anxiety.
Wow, so disintegration can really take us far away from our best selves. It sounds like it's crucial to be aware of these patterns.
It is.
So we can catch ourselves before we spiral down that unhealthy path.
Absolutely. The Enneagram isn't about labeling ourselves or feeling trapped by our type. It's about understanding our potential for growth, A and a D, our tendencies towards unhealthy behavior.
Right.
With awareness, we can make conscious choices to move towards integration.
This has been such an eye-opening journey. I feel like I've gained a whole new level of understanding, not only about myself, but about all the different ways people navigate the world.
That's great to hear.
So what's the most important thing you hope listeners take away from our deep dive into the Enneagram?
I hope they leave with a sense of curiosity and compassion, both for themselves and for others. The Enneagram is a powerful tool for understanding human behavior.
Yeah.
But it's up to each of us to use that knowledge to build more meaningful connections and live more fulfilling lives.
Well said.
Yeah.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the Enneagram, and I hope our listeners feel empowered to continue exploring this fascinating system. Thanks for joining us today.
It was my pleasure.